Last in Line Nation, welcome to another episode of December's month called Fuel, Faith Uniting Exceptional Leaders. And man, have we got a powerhouse episode today. We're bringing somebody in from back east. We're going to invite in who now I think may even live in Florida. But Joe Pellegrino is a guy who he's a men's pastor, he's an author, he's a speaker. He is actually the president and founder of a ministry called Legacy Minded Men. And, you know, I came across one of Joe's devotionals just in my morning time and just reading through things. And it really captivated me and really spoke to me. And just hearing his heart through words and just listening to a couple of his interviews, he's really passionate about leading men, equipping men, and really creating this Christ-centered men's legacy that we as men are called to lead. And so, like I said, he's the president and founder. I'm going to read a couple things of this international ministry called Legacy Minded Men. The mission for them is to transform lives by engaging, encouraging, and equipping men to build a Christ-centered legacy. Man, that in and of itself is powerful. He's appeared on several television interviews for Fox News and TBN, and he's been on some radio programs across the country, all really men-focused topics. He's the co-author of the books Safe at Home, Transformed, That's My Dad, and Fathers Say. And I think Transformed was one of the devotionals that I had read that's really, really powerful. He's developed and presents several workshops and seminars, including ones called Standing in the Gap, Not Just an Average Joe, and the 5.5 questions everyone must answer. So he and his wife Beth Ann have 3 children, and I'm thinking 1 grandchild now.
So one on the way.
Yeah, 1 on the way too, man. I tell you what, that was a mouthful, and I didn't do enough justice. And there's a lot more that Joe has done, and I just can't wait to hear his heart over this topic today. But Joe, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it very much.
Man, is there anything I left out, or anything maybe that's in the works? And we'll get to that at the end. But what did I leave out that you want folks to know about you?
It's just, listen, those are just words, just things. You know, when the Lord calls you to do things, you go do them. I mean, at the end of the day, the greatest honor I can receive is being called a servant leader. That's the goal, and that's what I try to do every day.
It's powerful, and I couldn't agree more. And that's really the heart behind what we're doing. The book I released, Last in Line Leadership, is all about servant leadership. And so I think, you know, that in and of itself is a concept that we're trying to reel back in. I feel like in society today, I feel like guys like you and things we're a part of, even on a small scale with this platform, I think we're all trying to just reel back in what God designed leadership to look like. And it starts with men in the homes, like you talk about and what you're passionate about. And so we're going to dive in. So this outline is called Turning Up the Heat. And of course, all the letters in heat, you know, are going to talk about something different. So we've got hope, we've got encouragement, we've got accountability, and we've got transformation. And these are all really, you know, hot topics that could really, if we get an idea of how to walk this out the right way as leaders, I think we can have some sort of part in the change for the better that I believe is just waiting to happen. So, Joe, you know, I wanted to start out with hope. We know we could go 100 different directions with hope, and I'm really just going to throw it out to you because I love hearing you speak about what you're passionate about, what God's called you to do. So just from a faith standpoint, you know, how can we do our portion with our portion that God's given us? How can we help be a voice of hope and sort of reach out to those that are out there that are really discouraged in a time like this?
Well, first of all, I think we need to understand the word faith is a powerful word. So we're talking about faith creating hope. Faith stands for, as I could see it, faith, full assurance in the heart. So we need to understand, you know, what is actually inside our heart, not just in our head, in our heart. And I truly believe that we're living in a time of hopelessness. We're seeing it all over the world. And there's one divine word that, I love to speak about because it's truly the only thing in life that we can control. We can't control the weather. We can't control our kids a lot of times. We can't control our bosses or anything like that. But this one word enables us to do, it really changed the whole paradigm. And that word is
Mm,
attitude.
wow.
Attitude, think about it, is the only thing you can control. Your
Mm,
response to any situation, good or bad, that's going to dictate the end of that situation. And the reason why I call it a divine word, John, is because if you take the word attitude and you stretch it out and you put the numeric value to each letter, A being 1, T being 20, T being 20, etc., and you
mm,
add it all up, you know what it comes to? 100. Now, I believe it's a divine word because you see, there's no such thing
wow.
as 110%.
Right.
However, there is such thing as 90%, 70%, and
Mm,
50%.
mm-hmm.
But God in his English language allowed us to have a word attitude which equals 100 because he says, I want 100% positive attitude from you. So that in every day you wake up excited when your feet hit the ground and say, Lord, what do you have for me today? That's hope. It's the difference between waking up and saying, good God, it's morning, and
Yeah.
good morning, God. Big difference. Okay. It's all in the attitude. I wake up every day and I expect something powerful to happen. I expect
Mm,
to meet somebody. I expect a new idea. I expect something to flush out. Is that 100% of the time? I can't lie to you. No, it's not. There are times when you're dragging, but for the most part, it's got to be
right.
significantly in the high 90s that you want to be
Right.
doing this. But God is saying, I want 100% of your attitude from me. And by the way, somebody can have 100% attitude, the wrong attitude as well. And we
Right.
know those people.
Absolutely. I've never heard it put that way, and the values you put on the letters is powerful. I don't know where you came up with that, but that's huge, and I hope
Not
somebody
original.
can take that away, man. I think that's awesome. Yeah, because I mean, we let it. Our attitude gets dictated by so many things, right? So many things that are beyond what are the internal core of what it should be based on. We let too many circumstances kind of deflect or distract our attitude, and that's where I think we are today. I think there's so much going on around us that it detracts from that total, that 100%, right? We're at a deficiency when it comes to that value of
That's right.
100%. So we're in a deficient state based on our attitude. And so as believers, you and I and the folks listening are thinking, how can we sort of help transform that as a whole, as an aggregate that's out there? Like, how can I go into my workplace and influence that 100%, if you will? If the workplace has an attitude of 100%, how can I walk in there and have an impact?
Well, one of the things you could do is this: you could smile. You know what? Your face will tell. It's worth a thousand words. And if you go in and you're in a positive state of mind and you're just showing it, even people who are just, I can't stand that guy because he's always happy or he's this. But the reality is they want the same thing. They want
Absolutely.
it. And what we do is we say we don't like something because we're jealous or we just don't think we can get that. But the truth of the matter is everybody can get this. Everybody.
Yeah.
And listen, my wife will tell you that I don't smile as much as I should because I'm so serious. I'm one of those guys that is a type AAA personality. I'm driven, and I'm always looking to the next thing. But the reality is, I also need to pause and just smell the roses. And,
Mm,
and that's extremely important to me now, and I've been doing a better job of it. But because in my heart I feel the joy, because we all know that there's a difference between happiness and joy. I hope we know that.
absolutely.
Happiness is circumstantial. You know, um, I got the big hit at the game today, or
Yep.
I lost a friend today. Happiness is circumstantial, but joy radiates from within. When you have the love
Hmm.
of the Lord, that joy radiates through you. And also, it provides another divine word. By the way, the two divine words in the English language to me are attitude and joy. Attitude,
Mm,
I already told you about. Let me tell you why joy, which you probably have heard this one. It gives you the formula to live a successful life: Jesus, others, and you.
Yeah.
That is powerful. I mean, you never have to go as far as the word joy. And knowing if I keep everything, which, by the way, when you say Jesus, others, and you, that is the definition of servant leadership. Okay,
Absolutely.
it's understanding you're serving your king, you're serving others, and the last person you take care of is yourself, and you do have to take care of yourself. That's
Absolutely.
essential. Otherwise, what good are you to other people?
Yeah. I mean, you must have read my book because there's a chapter that I call the joy conflict. And I talk exactly about, and I actually use the Jesus, others, and you example. And it's absolutely correct. Happiness is fleeting and joy is unshakable,
That's right.
or it should be.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, can you give us? I love examples. I love stories. I love people's just reaching in and grabbing a piece of somebody's journey and just having them verbalize it here. And can you give us an example of something in your life that was really, I mean, on all counts, just a hopeless situation, on the surface was complete. And then but you had to, stepped back and kind of reset and then turned it around, and through your joy, your faith, your attitude, all that, give us an example of how you sort of transformed that situation.
Well, I don't know how much time you have, John, but I got a doozy for you. Back in 1998, I had co-owned a newspaper. We sold it to an internet company, this new thing called the internet, and it
Mm,
was a $2 million stock deal. And we were betting on this company that was buying us to take their stock because it was an internet company, and that's what you're supposed to do, invest in those kind of things. So we sold our newspaper to them, and we were still running it, but it wasn't going well. And quite frankly, I was involved in a lot of sin at the time. I was a fairly new Christian, but I was making some stupid mistakes.
mhm,
And the long and short is we decided to sell the company, and I was going to start my dream company, which was a multimedia business, and we called it BizLink. Don Mattingly from the New York Yankees was one of my partners, and he was on all of our billboards and all of that. And so, we were set. We raised $1.3 million effortlessly,
wow,
and
wow,
it was pretty cool. Except I think I was 38 at the time. Everybody wanted me to go public because that was the thing you did back then. With the stock bubble, the tech bubble.
yeah,
Anyway, the long and short is we had bought a company on a stock deal, and the president of that company and my vice president of sales allegedly got together to do some bad things. Of course, I look back now and I recognize that it was all my fault. I was the president and CEO. I allowed it all to happen. Lost that company. That company went. We was voted to go. I only own 31% of the time. The direct board of directors voted to go bankrupt, so we went bankrupt. I was urged to go bankrupt personally. I refused. I didn't think it was biblical. So I went home, told my wife we just lost the company, lost everything. And then I went back to her and I said, they want to put the company in bankruptcy, and there's about $200,000 of corporate debt that's going to flow into that bankruptcy. We know a lot of those people that are going to lose money. I said, I know we don't have anything right now, but I want to take on the debt personally. And she didn't even blink an eye. And we took on $200,000 of debt and you got to understand, John, I didn't have a penny to my name now. I lost everything. I had a mortgage, 3 small kids, and I was married, and I had no idea what I was going to do. So it was really, really bad. As a matter of fact, I always tell people if I didn't have the Lord in my life, I would have blown my head wide open because it was
wow,
that bad. But
wow.
over the course of the next 3 years, it was really interesting to find out. The guy who lost the second most money to me, he lost $400,000. He called me up. He sued everybody in the company, by the way, except me. And I was the president and CEO. And I asked him, I said, why didn't you sue me? And he said, you're stupid, but you're honest. And I said, well, I don't think I'm stupid, but I'll accept that for now.
Backhanded
And
compliment.
anyway, he started a new company and he hired me, and it was an extremely humbling job for me. I mean, I
Mm,
dropped down significantly, but I needed a job. And over the course of the next couple of years, we decided we were going to move from New Jersey to Georgia, and went down there and met with my cousin who was a pseudo realtor, and we saw a house real nice, and we decided we're going to move. The only thing is, when are we going to move, because we have the kids in school and so forth. And I get back to New Jersey, and several people are asking about the company that I used to own, the newspaper. Remember, I
Mm.
told you we sold it for $2 million stock deal. What I didn't tell you is the company that we sold it to went belly up. So for my $2 million company, I got $0. Now my partner, my ex-partner at the newspaper, decided to take the company back from them and rebuild it. But because I had a lot of sin in that company, I didn't want to touch it. Long and short is the day I get back from Georgia, he calls me up and he said, let's have breakfast. And he tells me that he just sold the company to the big daily paper in New Jersey for $2.7 million in cash. And I'm thinking, well, he knows my situation. I'm sure he's going to throw me
Wow.
a bone.
Wow.
All he said was they're buying it to put it out of business because it was the only thing in their way. And I left that meeting. I don't think I've ever felt as low as I could feel. I went home
Wow.
and I told my wife, and she said to me, why don't we start a newspaper? If they're putting it out of business, why don't we start one? You know everybody. I said, no, we're going to Georgia. I really believe we're going to Georgia. And then this guy named George, who owned a newspaper called Life and Leisure, calls me. And he said, hey, I just saw what happened, that your partner sold the business and now they're leaving a hole. I want to go in there and take my newspaper. And I said, go ahead. And he said, no, I can't do it without you. I said, George, God's leading me to Georgia. But I agreed to have breakfast with him. So we had breakfast and he's going on and he's telling me why I should do this. I said, George, God is leading me to Georgia. And he said a line that I'll never forget. He said, you didn't hear him right. He didn't say, I'm leading you to Georgia. He said, I'm leading you to George. I'm
George.
leading you to George. And I thought that was great. So we had dinner with our wives that night. They were all excited. And I said, look, I know what it takes to start a business like this. They put it out of business. We have to be on the streets in 3 weeks because they're going to suck up all the advertisers that were there and put them into their daily paper, and we're going to be out of luck. Long and short is, I said, if this is of God, we have to put this together a staff in 1 day, and we have to be on the streets in 3 weeks. Well, we put a staff together in 1 day. We were on the streets in 3 weeks in 1 day. And I had that newspaper for 13 and a half years and sold it in December of 2016. And that brought me down to Florida. That situation changed everything for me. It was a paradigm shift because I was down. It took me 18 years to pay off that debt. But all along the way, God was showing me lessons. He was showing me to be humble. He was showing me what I should be doing. And that's what led to the birth of Legacy Minded Men. And Legacy Minded Men was born out of my newspaper, Life and Leisure, because we funded it for the first several years. So it was hopeless, John. It was a hopeless situation. And like I said, I know many, many people would have quit. But because I didn't quit, number one, has led to me to build Legacy Minded Men, to encourage people all over the country, all over the world through my writings and so forth. And it was a hopeless situation turned into an absolutely powerful situation.
And I mean, there were several times in that story where I could see me and probably a lot of the listeners, there were plenty opportunities to quit. That's the first thing that I think of. There were so many opportunities to quit. And I think, first of all, you were in touch with where you felt God was leading you. So it wasn't just about what your flesh thought or felt. That's one thing that stands out. And just the fact that you were willing to listen to other people that you probably trusted, helped you sort of rally around that support system, and then ultimately feel like the leading in a certain way, and you made that decision to take that step of faith. And I mean, that's huge because so many times believers lost, whatever, people, men, we get caught up in what feels right in the moment. And I feel like if we stop and are listening and are patient with where we feel like the Spirit's leading us, we can make better decisions. And I think it's good to have, it talks about there's wisdom in the multitude of counselors. And I feel like, that's a huge thing. So for those people hearing that story, I hope they understood that there's so many opportunities to quit through a process, through a journey. And I feel like, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, John, let me forgive me for interrupting, but this is
No.
important. I was a quitter for more than half of my life,
Wow.
but Christ changes everything.
Mm,
And I also looked at my situation instead of woe is me, which there was a little bit of that, to
mm,
different people that I lamented to. But instead of doing that, what I recognize is, remember, I mentioned I made a lot of mistakes. I mean, I told so many lies when I was younger that to this day, I don't know what my childhood was like. So,
Mm,
there are consequences to our sin. But the Lord is faithful. And what
mhm,
he does is he's going to discipline you. So I looked at it as, you know what, this is my discipline. And I need to
mhm,
come out of this on the other side, understanding who I am, whose I am, and why I am.
mhm.
And it's a question of identity, it's a question of relationship, and it's a question of purpose. And that's exactly what's transpired. And that's why a lot of my talks, a lot of my books, uh, a lot of our conferences are based on those three things: identity, relationships, and purpose.
Wow. Yeah. And I'm going to write those down too when we get done, because I think that's a great perspective, because we can get going in 100 different directions. But if we keep those three things sort of our baseline, man, I feel like we can do wonderful things. As we transition toward this encouragement piece, encouragement's huge. Like we can't get around that. Regardless of where you are in your faith journey, everybody needs it. Everybody's equipped to give it. and
Mhm.
and so I feel like that's a huge foundational driver, if you will, in how we impact people around us, how we walk this out as leaders, Christian leaders, how we as men can take back sort of the reins of what we lost control of somewhere along the lines, mostly back in the Garden of Eden. But I feel like encouragement is something that we all can do. You
Mhm.
don't have to have a master's degree. You don't have to be 50 years of experience as a quote unquote certified encourager. So talk about encouragement, and even, we can even use that story as a process of I'm sure you had to get encouragement along the way, but even now more focused on legacy minded men. That is I would say encouragement is part of the banner that waves over that whole ministry. So, talk about encouragement in your life, and then how you have been that for those guys.
Encouragement is huge. I've had some great mentors, and they have been there for me. They've encouraged me to keep moving forward. They've encouraged me to keep following my dream. But I remember words my wife gave me when we lost the business, and she said to me, "Stop looking at the mountain in front of you
Mhm,
and look down and take one step at a time."
mhm,
And all of a sudden, that big mountain is going to turn into a rock, and one day you're going to be able to just kick that rock out of the way.
mhm.
And I'm paraphrasing what she said, but that was the gist of it. As far as, one of my spiritual gifts is definitively encouragement. I want to encourage people. When I'm out to a restaurant, I'll ask the waiter or the waitress what their name is, and I'll say, "We're going to pray for breakfast or lunch or dinner. How can I pray for you?" And I
Mhm.
can't tell you, John, how many times people have broken down and cried because nobody's ever
Wow.
done that for them.
Wow.
And I was in New Jersey in October, and there was an Asian girl, and she was serving us. And I said that without 3 seconds passing, she starts crying. And I said, "What is it?" And she said, "I'm scared. I'm so scared of this COVID. I'm so scared." And we prayed, and we just talked to her. Uh, that's happened many times to me. But something happened this past Saturday that I'll share with you.
Mhm,
We were on our global leadership summit call with our leaders from around the world. We're right now in about 27 countries, legacy minded men, and we had people on from India, Iran, Germany, several countries in Africa, Rwanda, and I'm on this call and I'm listening to my associate lead the call, and I'm listening to the feedback of what this ministry has done for them and how they're thanking us for everything that we're doing. And then it came my turn to kind of just sow some encouragement into them. And I took 15 minutes, and it was amazing, amazing, because they were holding on to every word, because, we take for granted over here that they know everything over there. Well, they
mhm.
don't. And what's simple to us is not simple to them. Anyway, when we were done, the words that they said were just so awesome, and I walked away incredibly encouraged. And I said to my assistant, I said, "I had no idea the impact we're making, no idea, until you look in the eyes of these men and this one woman, um, and you hear what this ministry has done for them." So on the same day, I received unbelievable encouragement, and I was able to provide it as well.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely a bi-directional is what I call it. function of what God's gifted us to be and do. Like I feel like it's a two-way street for sure. And you know, I think, you know, part of the reason a lot of these social media platforms have derived lately through COVID is because there's so much negativity. I feel like somebody, you know, we're all trying to have a voice, right? We're all trying to have a voice that counteracts just the death and darkness and despair that's out there. And I feel like,
It's
you know,
countercultural.
it is. And that's one of the reasons I felt God was leading me to do what I was doing with that book, because I've always been too busy to write a book. I didn't have time to do that. And was I really equipped to do? So following the lead and just having a voice and feeling like I had a small portion to play, and enough people doing that, I feel like is crucial, because man, so many lies, and the only thing that counteracts lies is truth. And I think the more truth we can spread and just share with those out there, I think it can draw us together. And that's part of why I created this December theme of faith uniting exceptional leaders, and I call it Fuel. You know, because as believers, we got to do it. We have to unite. We have to lock arms. We have to walk alongside each other. And I think we all have a voice. So, you know, to stay encouraged through these circumstances, like you said, the waitress or anybody, it could be a CEO in an ivory tower somewhere that's discouraged because of what we're seeing right now. Giving examples of, you know, how you stayed encouraged through maybe some discouragement, or can you give some advice to those that are listening, how to persevere and press through what we're seeing?
First of all, on that word perseverance, that is my book, Transform: 7 Pillars of a Legacy Minded Man. Pillar number 6 is perseverance. And when I presented at churches, two pastors have come up to me and said, listen, would you please focus more on pillar 6, perseverance, than the others? And I said, why? And he said, because our men are quitters. Our men are quitters. And I thought that was really interesting. But
Wow.
let me say this. When you recognize whose you are,
Mm-hmm.
how he wired you, you recognize that Ephesians 2:10 comes to light. You are
Mm-hmm.
God's workmanship, crafted in Christ Jesus, to do good works, which he prepared in advance for you to do. That I call a specific purpose. God says, I have a specific purpose for every single person that I ever created. Whether they're going to accept that or not is a different story.
Yeah.
You see, I've coined a term, and it's in my newest book, which is the 5.5 questions everyone must answer. It's called purposeful identity. And purposeful identity says you can never achieve true purpose until you know who you truly are, your identity. Identity releases purpose. And when we take the time to really look in the mirror and say, is that really who I am? You know, what what changes do I need to make? You know, is this how God wired me, or am I going on my own strength? When you recognize that, I truly believe that God opens the door, your eyes. He takes the scales off and he shows you what that specific purpose is, because we know as believers we have a general purpose, which is found in Luke chapter 10 verse 27. You are God, forgive me, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Every Christian is called to that. Then the second part of general purpose is Matthew chapter 28, verses 19 and 20, which is the Great Commission. He's calling us out to go out into the nations and share the good news, but not just share it, then to disciple. So the general purpose is summed up in love me as the Father, love the people I've created, show them the right way, and then teach them. Take them down the road and teach them. General purpose, specific purpose, Ephesians 2:10, which is something that God has called each one of us to. So I know who I am, I know
Mm-hmm.
why I am, and I know whose I am. And when you have the answer to those 3 questions, you cannot lose in life. You can't, because it's you know, it's pointing you exactly to where you need to go. Now, is the road going to be easy? No, I promise you, if you know the answer to those 3 questions, it probably won't, because the devil doesn't want you to go along that line. He doesn't want that roadmap for you. He wants to send you into confusion, which is really what we're seeing in the world today. When we look at 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3, it gives us the order of God. God, Christ, man, woman. Does that mean that man is better than woman? No. It simply means there's an order, a pecking order. For example, if I have 2 CEOs of a Fortune 500 company, and we come into this stalemate, well, who's making the final decision? Well, if you have 2 CEOs and they're on opposite sides, they're never going to be able to fix the problem. That's what God is saying. I called the man to lead and make that final decision. But again, in order for him to be equipped to make that final decision, he's got to be a real man. And if you want to know what a real man is, all you need to do is turn your pages to 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verses 13 and 14, which gives you the framework of what we call a legacy-minded man. It says, be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, be men of courage, be strong, and do everything in love. 5 mandates of a godly man, 5 mandates of a legacy-minded man. And no woman can argue against that, because if a godly man is raised up, he is going to treat her and love her the way the Father does. And he's going to treat his children the right way. He's not going to exasperate them. He is going to love on them and teach them the right way. That's a perfect world. And yet we're arguing against it. And I realize I'm getting way off the question.
No, you got me going in different directions in my mind too, because there's so many things to say to that, and I 100%, 1,000%, if there even was such a thing, agree with you, because I think so. Just my 2 cents on that topic is it wouldn't be so opposed nowadays if men did what you said and were worthy of that leadership. Like if we earned that trust and accountability and responsibility, I think it would be welcomed. I think they would say, look, yes, we're wired to want you to lead us.
Absolutely.
So I don't think there would be such opposition if it was if the men were exemplifying what you just said.
Let's talk about Solomon for a minute, right?
Yeah.
God says, what do you want? And instead of riches and women and all that, he said, I want wisdom. And because he asked for wisdom, God gave him all the riches as well. He gave him all the power. He was the most powerful man ever. Yet he chose to go and be with women who are going to lead him astray. Now, the point I'm trying to make is this. Just because we have wisdom doesn't mean we're going to exude it. Doesn't mean we're going to put it into action. Just because I know I love the Lord does not mean I'm putting it into action. And I believe that men, I love baseball, and I was a big baseball card collector. And back in 1972, they had in-action cards. It used to say in action, and you'd see a player with a picture in action. And only a few players were in action cards. And I think that's the way we live right now today. That's what we're seeing, because we're lacking leadership. We're lacking men of action. Wow. Men can do this, but they're not actually acting on it. That's where we're falling short. That's why when we hear that Satan is the author of confusion, he's the author of chaos, we're out of order. We're out of order. And I'll end by saying this. The last verse in the Old Testament before God fell silent for 400 years was Malachi 4:6, which says, he will turn the hearts of the fathers back to their children and the children back to their fathers. And that's the way most people remember the verse. But there's another line. Or else I will come and strike the ground with a curse. As far as I could see, John, that's exactly what we're seeing today. We are out of order. And God, who fell silent for 400 years until the time of Christ, that was the curse. The final Old Testament curse was a curse on the land as a whole and all that are in it. And that's what we're seeing today, because men have abdicated their role as leaders, husbands, and fathers. That is the greatest problem in the world today.
It is. And it's never too late to change it. Not going to be overnight, but it is never too late. And when you were talking about teaching others and equipping and being God's workmanship that he, prepared beforehand for us to do. The verse that came to me was 2 Timothy 2:2 that talks about teach faithful men so that they can teach others. And I'm paraphrasing, and it kind of leads us into our next bullet point of accountability, because a lot of from what I've seen in legacy minded men, and I'm going to have you expound on it, but what I've seen is accountability is a major factor in winning. Let's just make it simple. It's a huge factor in winning in what we're talking about. So give me an example of sort of something tactical, something strategic that you use in your life, kind of a go-to tool or methodology that has worked for you that you've tried to replicate through legacy minded men.
Well, one of the things is when I'm dealing with my pastor or other pastors, when I shake their hand, I'll say, "How are you doing with your wife? How you doing with your children?" And hopefully they're being honest with me and they give me an honest answer. If I sense that somebody is not being honest with me, I won't let go of their hand. I'll pull them closer and I'll simply say these words to them. "How you doing? Really? Really?" And I'll hold them and I'll look in their eyes. And I can't tell you how many times their eyes shift. And I've had times where the guys started crying because nobody took the time to really care enough to ask them the questions. And so I, as a means of encouragement, I believe it's all about relationships. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, "Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character," which means conversely, good company promotes good character.
Mm-hmm.
So, you want to make sure that inner circle of people that are around you are there to edify you, hold you accountable, and to build you up, because they're the ones who are going to help catapult you to the next level. Because I promise you this, as a leader, you recognize as you lead and you poke through then another level, another devil. Sure. And the devils are there and they're trying to knock you down, but then you go through another level and they get a little bit stronger. At every level, they're going stronger and you're popping through. And you've got to recognize that if you call yourself a leader, if you're going to step out, and I urge you to, because we are lacking leaders today, that you're gonna have a target on your back. So you need to protect yourself by knowing what the Word of God says, by praying, asking others to pray for you, and having others hold you accountable. Listen, I was just telling some of the guys that I'm mentoring now, I said, something? It's funny. I ask you all the questions. You never ask me. Why don't you ask me, how am I doing with my thought life? How am I doing? Because quite frankly, sometimes you're not going to like what you hear, but you're going to hear the truth. Because you know what? I'm a man of flesh and blood, and it's a difficult world out there. And we need to recognize that we have to be on top of our game constantly. We cannot just go and be stale about what we believe by simply using words. You've got to have the actions to follow it up.
Yeah. And I call it, given in the accountability space, I call it giving somebody permission to hold the mirror and hold it in our face, and somebody that we trust, and somebody that, because it's not all about just a yes person that we have. Right. It's not somebody that tells us, it's all roses and rainbows and what we want to hear. Because true accountability for breakthrough, like you talk about, breaking through those levels, true accountability is hearing what we maybe don't want to hear, but need to hear. And everybody needs, as you're talking, everybody needs a Mickey. Everybody needs a corner guy, right? A guy that can see your holes, your blind spots, your weaknesses, but you're out there and you're fighting every day. But you need somebody to kind of pull you back to the corner and be like, okay, hey, it's going to be fine. It's going to be okay. Persevere, keep going. So do you what do you find as maybe some gaps in that process with the guys you're teaching and the seminars you hear from all these people from all over the world? What are the gaps that keep us from really reaching that level?
Fear is a big one. Fear of showing yourself to others. I call it taking the mask off. And, so many people, like you say, they love to yes me to death because they think they're going to tell me what I want to hear. I want the truth. Give me the truth, whether it's about me or about a situation we're talking about. And so many people are going through life with this mask on. And now we're living in a world where you have to wear a mask. But the reality is that's no, there's no difference between the masks that we've been wearing in the secular world versus the masks we've been wearing in the Christian world well before 2020 came about. We put on
Mm,
this mask and this face that we think people want to see. And I use a football as an example. And
mhm,
I hold a football up and I take all the air out and I say, this football was built for purpose, but in its current state, it can never realize the purpose it was created for because why? It lacks the proper inflation. And that was my life. I would take that empty football and I'd try to pull it and make it look good on the outside. But when my back was against the wall and you squeezed it, there was nothing in there. When you realize that we need to fill our lives up with the power of Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit, that's the
mhm,
proper inflation, and let him speak and minister to us. It's like taking that football properly inflated and putting it in the hands of a master, a Tom Brady, so that when the ball gets thrown, it's a tight spiral, cuts through the air with the greatest of ease, goes into the arms of an equally gifted receiver.
mhm.
That's the same way we are that football, and we need to put ourself in the hand of the master and trust him to steer us and to drive us because we can't lose with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would, it's hard for men because we talked about part of our commission is to teach and to equip and then to replicate and watch God exponentially multiply
Mhm,
that model.
mhm.
And that's the goal is, we're trying to model and replicate discipleship and make, help others get better at it so that they can help others. And we start watching this spread. And
Right.
I think it's so difficult. Even, so church leadership that I'm involved in writing curriculum for men's ministry and leading and teaching classes. And man, what I see is just consistency is the word that comes to mind. Is just is lacking. So
I mean, lack of
being
consistency.
yeah, being steady and not, because one bad thing happens and then all of a sudden, wow, this Christian thing doesn't work out, or this, me and my spirituality just isn't working because I had some stuff happen, and or I went back to this old sin, or man, what's one piece of advice, be somebody's accountability partner right now in 5 seconds or 20 seconds, and tell them, if someone's asking you, how do I stay consistent?
The way you stay consistent is two things. You get into the Word of God, make sure that it's part of your daily regimen. You pray every day, and you hold yourself accountable. You make yourself accountable to somebody else where they're going to ask you a question. As a matter of fact, we had a meeting the other day and we just came out with a brand new high powered app and it is absolutely fantastic. But one thing I want to incorporate in it going forward is we now have a tracker of devotions and a tracker of, when you pray, and it asks every day, did you pray today? And if so, click yes. And then we give you the opportunity to journal what you prayed about. But one of the things that we want to incorporate now is an accountability tool where midweek it pops up some questions that you're going to see every week. And they're going to be in your face, and you don't have to answer them per se. You don't have to do, but you have to look at them and they're supposed to really penetrate your heart and say, you know what? I screwed up this week. I
Yeah.
screwed up. And give you the opportunity now to click something and say, listen, I fell short here. Please pray for me, or things like that. It's extremely simple to make yourself accountable. But when you make yourself accountable to somebody else, you got to be honest with them.
Yeah.
You gotta
Yeah.
you gotta say, listen, tell me what you need to tell me. I'm putting my life in your hands. Good. You got the permission. Go for it. Like you said, I'm giving you the mirror. Go for it.
Yeah. And it all comes down to a choice and a commitment of how much we want to grow. So if we want to grow, and that's the whole point of doing this platform, is hopefully somebody takes one thing and it helps them grow in their faith, in their leadership, in who they've been called to be, in their purpose. But in this regard, I think about, um, it's got to just not only be consistent, but there's got to be a growth component, and we've got to challenge ourselves, because you're only going to grow as much as you're committed to grow, really, and how intentional you are about seeking out somebody to help you see those blind spots. I think That's huge. It sounds like there's a lot of men that are benefiting from just what you're doing with Legacy Minded Men and the people you have in place. And I would love, I think it'd be great to hear testimonials and hear just where guys have grown.
Mhm.
So as we go into transformation, the final letter in the heat, turning up the heat. So the transformation, and I will say that this has been a good heat because there's been some things talked about that really forces people to look at themselves and examine where they want to be, where they are, where they're going. And so transformation could be talked about in two contexts. It could be talked about like how do we transform ourselves, right? And we've talked about that. We've talked about the word. It starts with the word in our relationship with Christ and really understanding what he's got in planned for us and how
Mhm.
good he is. And we're part of that equation. So how do we go into the world? Because it says, don't be conformed by the world, but be transformed by renewing our minds. How can we transform environments that maybe aren't so aligned with our spirituality or what we see and what we believe? How can we sort of be a part of that positive change?
Well, let's go back to the original question and the divine word, attitude. You got to understand something. If you put one man in a group of 100, and he is the only light in that entire 99 with the 100, if that man's attitude is to basically serve the Lord and be a servant leader to all those other men, and he just is always positive and he's encouraging and he's doing all the things that we talked about today, pretty soon you're going to see numbers 2 and 3, and then 4 and 5. And we know when we get into a dark room and you have 100 people and one candle is lit, it
Mm-hmm.
shines. And
Mm-hmm.
he's, and we pass that candle around. So really, at the end of the day, it starts with you. It starts with your listeners, your viewers. It starts with me. We have to make a decision that, oh, well, I can't talk about that here because they don't do that here. Well, you know what? Understand something. Everybody wants to be encouraged. They may not say they want to be encouraged, but they want. Remember, this gets back to the mask. I'm
Oh yeah.
hiding myself because I got to be. I'm hard. I'm this
Oh
and
yeah.
that. But the reality is, I want to be encouraged. I want to know who I am. I want to know why I am. I want to know whose I am. Please tell me, and don't quit on me. Just show it by the way you live. And so that's what I believe. I really do believe it starts with us. And too many. I'll share this quick story with you. There
Yeah.
was a guy who, a good friend of mine, and we were in Sunday school together. And he came out of Sunday school and he said, you're a mover and shaker. Why don't you take this idea that I thought of and run with it? I said, wait a minute. You thought of it, and you're asking me to run with it? God gave it to you. Run with it. Too many people want to pass the buck and eliminate the action part. Remember, we talked about that.
Yeah.
Action is huge.
Yeah.
And unless we recognize that, an idea is only an idea until it's put into action, it's
Yeah.
extraordinarily, it drives me insane when I'm dealing with people who don't want to accept the responsibility that God has actually called them to do.
Yeah. And I would say, along those lines is we to activate, excuse me, to activate our faith, we absolutely have to put legs on an idea or a dream or a leading that we feel. The Bible talks about faith without works is dead. And I think people misinterpret what that means. Like, no, you don't go to heaven based on your works. That's not what it's talking. You exercise and activate and demonstrate your faith by what you're actually putting into action, what you're doing. And so, like, that example, God gives an idea or a dream to somebody. It's it's meant for us. We're unique. It's meant for our unique giftings and for our sphere of influence. Like, it's meant for that moment. And the book of where Mordecai's talking to Esther and says, you were built for a time such as
Such a
this.
time as this, yeah.
And I believe that those things are put in us for that moment, and it's meant for us to walk out. Yes, we need people around us to help us activate that and execute it. But I think that's a key point you made. Man, I wish we could pinpoint this down to one thing, but my next question is going to be a little. It could go 100 different directions, but talk to the men right now. Uh, that's your wheelhouse. I'm lobbing a softball up to a guy that is just 100% in tune with building men. Um, talk to the men about how can we get back to the blueprint that God drew up long ago? Like as men, how do we get back to? And I know you've talked some about it, but I maybe in a couple different little nuggets, something guys can walk away tangibly and go, okay, that's what I'm grabbing onto. That's what I'm going to start executing day one. What's something that we can get back to the original blueprint of what God created the men as leaders to be?
Well, first of all, you need to read the blueprint. It's pretty simple. If you don't have the blueprint, how do you know where to go? And when you're in that blueprint, you're going to find what God is calling men to all over. But I will tell them specifically to go to 1 Corinthians 16, verses 13, 14, which we already spoke about.
Yeah.
And let's break it down. First part of that says, be alert. Be alert. That means protect yourself, protect your heart, protect your mind, protect your family, protect what's been given to you. Be aware that there is one who wants to destroy you and doesn't want to see you go on that path. Number two, stand firm in the faith. Well, here's the problem, John, that I find, and that's why I wrote the book, The 5.5 Questions Everyone Must Answer. Most people don't know who they are. As a matter of fact, a study was done and only 25% of the people in this country know what their purpose is. And I quite frankly disagree with that. I think the number is far less than that.
Yeah.
So if in fact you look at this and you say, okay, if that's true, then I need to understand, if I could stand firm in my faith, I need to know what that faith is. I need to believe in that faith. I need to be willing to die for that faith. And we are not there. I promise you we are not there. Number three, be men of courage. Well, what does that mean? That means do not fear. Do not fear. You have a mighty, mighty king who's got your back. Do not fear. And then fourth is be strong. Be strong is not power strong. It's an inner strength. It's a persevering strength. You're not going to quit. And then the fifth one, which is really challenging, is do everything in love. It's been always challenging for me until I realized Luke chapter 10:27, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, so he's talking about the power of relationships. We need to love him first, and he will give us the strength to love others as we love him, as he loves the church. 5 components of being a Christ-centered, legacy-minded man. You start there, and I promise you, you cannot fail. But make sure you do it with other men and have this discussion. Talk about it. Go on YouVersion of the Bible and find my devotional, The 5 Mandates of a Godly Man, and go through that 7-day program. And I promise you, it will move you to change if you want to be a man of action.
And I will tell the listeners, that's the one I read. That devotional is the one I read that made me reach out to you. And so that right there tells me, it will move you in a good direction. It will open your eyes to things. And even, we talk about, hey, I want to lose weight. Here's a perfect diet. Well, if I don't actually implement it, then that's just a good idea. But what Joe's saying about don't fear, like we are gonna obviously have those fearful thoughts rise up, but it's do it anyway. It's persevere through the fear. Even if we have the fear, it's a don't quit because you haven't failed. It's a do it anyway, because that's what really courage defined is like in the face of fear, doing it anyway. So I would say, guys, you're gonna feel that. We're going to feel that fear rise up, but courage and someone's strength beyond our own is going to get us through that. So we've got to stay close to the Father. We've got to stay in the Word, in prayer, in tune with what God's doing, because that will help us. It can't just be about our own strength, because in our own fleshly strength,
can't do it.
We can't do it.
And understand something, fear, if you haven't heard this one before, is false evidence appearing real. When you look at your life and you look at the fears and you start putting it through that lens, false evidence appearing real, might make you think a little bit more about fear.
It's all about perspective. So, okay. So as we close, I'm going to ask you, and then we'll tell everybody how to find your resources. But when we look back at the trail, that you walked, right? We're going to look back, and it's all about, we talk about legacy. It's in the name of your ministry, but um, what is going to be evidence when we look back and say, yep, Joe Pellegrino walked this road? What's going to be evidence of that?
Again, the whole idea of what we do is Christ-centered legacy. It doesn't matter what I do. It's a matter what he does through me. And that means I'm allowing him to use me as a vessel. And the end of the day, the greatest legacy that I could leave is pointing my children to the Lord and pointing others to the Lord, not to me. There's nothing special about me. I am just an average Joe, believe me. But the reality is, we all have greatness in us. It's called the power of the Holy Spirit if you know Jesus Christ. But again, unless I believe what we're experiencing in the world today is a capping of the Holy Spirit. We call ourselves Christians, but we cap the Spirit because we truly don't trust him. We don't want him to come out. But the bottom line is this: the devil doesn't care about the Jesus in you. He cares about the Jesus coming out of you. That's the problem. And you need to uncap the power of the Spirit. Let him flow through you and out of you. Watch what happens.
Wow. The devil doesn't care about the Jesus in you. It's the Jesus coming out of you. Wow. I mean, that's enough right there. I'm glad you saved that to the end, because that's a major, there's the hook, guys. So I will ask Joe, tell us where we can find your resources. Obviously, legacymindedmen.org. Is that correct? What are some other things?
Legacymindedmen.org. Everything's there, but I strongly encourage you to find our app on Google Play or on the iTunes, the Apple Store. Look for Legacy Minded Men app, and I promise you'll love it. Every week we dispense new videos. We've got about 400 on there now, and we're loading more up. But these are simple teachings by average guys, just like you, just like me.
Wow.
And these are tools to keep us engaged. And workshops are on there. We're building more workshops. We're coming out with a new one called Standing in the Gap, which is all about the power of mentoring and how you could be a mentor. Because again, God's calling you. He's calling you to lead. So get out there and mentor. And then we just finished one called the 5.5 Questions Everyone Must Answer. It's a 3.5-hour workshop, which is just being finalized now. It'll be released next month. So great tools. Get to the website, go download the app, and you should be good.
Okay. All right. Hey, this has been tremendous. I mean, we could talk for hours, and there's videos out there of Joe Pellegrino and some of the interviews he's done that are powerful. I encourage you to go get some of those. But I will tell you, stick to those five pillars that he talked about. Give us the scripture one more time, where to find that.
1 Corinthians 16, verses 13 and 14, the 5 mandates of a man of God.
There you go. Okay. That's it right there. That's a great starting point. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it for you taking the time, and I know the listeners got something out of it. So, folks, thanks for joining us. Again, Faith Uniting Exceptional Leaders. This is just another exceptional leader that we've had the privilege of hearing from, because we turned up the heat. We talked about hope, encouragement, accountability, and transformation. So I think you have enough to start with, but again, it takes action. So until next time, be blessed.